All right, so we are continuing our discussion about the Chinese Civil War, the nature of that war, and how it was fought. And now we get to the second part. And so we're going to look at World War II and how that changed the course of the war. And then the last few years of the war after World War II, from 46 to 49. This is a part 1. And here we get to our learning outcomes. So basically, after watching this series of videos, yup, that's right, you're in for a treat. Be happy. I'm hoping that you understand the impact that World War II had on the outcomes of the Chinese Civil War, how it maybe altered the course of the war, and then understand how the war was fought at this time and how it was different than the first segment of the war right after the Shanghai Massacre through the Long March. And then finally, as we wrap up our discussion of the Chinese Civil War, spoiler alert, the GMD loss. I know, I ruined it for you. And the CCP won. So we have to figure out, analyze the reasons why this was the case. OBKB, the following video clip is going to look at the invasion of Manchuria. And once again, remember that this happened in 1931, what the international situation was at this time with the Great Depression, Japan's reasons for invading Manchuria. These are things that we spoke about previously, but now we're going to look at it from the Chinese perspective. And this is going to have a really big impact on Chiang Kai-shek's regime. And also, this means that Chiang Kai-shek is not only trying to deal with the CCP and some warlords that don't exactly agree with him, but also having to deal with the Japanese threat as well, especially if you want to think about, the failure of the Chinese Republic as a democracy. I'm just saying.
Chiang Kai-shek had nearly wiped out the communists. But he faced another threat, a foreign threat, which many considered more dangerous than the communists: Japan. For years, Japan had had economic interests in North China and Manchuria. Throughout the 1920s, it expanded its interests and defended them with increasingly hostile military activity. Japan's aim was to colonize China. The Japanese posed the greatest threat to the warlord of the region, Zhang Shiliang. Zhang Shiliang was one of the most powerful men in China. He was the Generalissimo's second in command, and he retained his own huge, well-equipped army. In September 1931, the Japanese attacked Zhang Shiliang's troops.
We bore the brunt of the attack. The brigade commander gave orders. First, he telephoned me and asked me about the situation. Then he gave the order, "Don't resist. You are not permitted to resist." I pointed out that the enemy had already begun to attack. He said then, "Collect the soldiers' weapons and hide them in the storehouse." I said that there was no way I could collect the soldiers' weapons and hide them when the enemy was shelling us. He said, "Then why don't you withdraw?" I said, "I have only received an order to offer no resistance. I have no order to withdraw." He said, "It would be better if you withdraw. Otherwise, you will be held responsible." Then the phone was cut off.
The Chinese troops did not resist, and the Japanese quickly seized control of all of Manchuria. Chiang Kai-shek, afraid the Japanese military would crush China, had chosen a policy of non-resistance. His deputy commander, Zhang Shiliang, protested the situation. Many held him responsible. Others believed he had received orders from Chiang Kai-shek, and they blamed the government.
We should have resisted. If I had been brigade commander, I would not have withdrawn. I would have resisted until daylight. When a foreign army attacks the cities of another country in broad daylight, I don't think that can be justified to the world.
We have a saying, an army is maintained for 1,000 days to be used for one. Why didn't they fight? I was very angry.
The Japanese used Chinese protests as an excuse to attack Shanghai. This time, there was hard-fought resistance.
Hello, everybody. This is Floyd Gibbons speaking. This was the last stand, the last barricade of the Chinese forces of the 19th Route Army that opposed the advance of the Japanese Marines through these ruins. Hardly a month ago, families lived in these places, fathers, mothers, and children. This was all that they had in the world.
In that part of Chao-Pei occupied by the Japanese, all means of communication are being destroyed. All Chinese found in this quarter are forced to undergo a thorough search as snipers. Possession of arms is taken as conclusive evidence of guilt, and the punishment is certain death.
A ceasefire was declared in Shanghai, but prospects for peace were dim. On March 1st, 1932, Japan set up a puppet government in Manchuria, which they renamed Manchukuo. They installed the former boy emperor, Puyi, now a young man, as head of state. The Chinese were angered and humiliated by the Japanese attacks and by the government's response. These feelings were expressed in demonstrations, the art.
And yay! Now that you finished watching that video, here comes the red questions. So take a minute to revise what was the international response to the invasion, and what were the reasons for such a response, the political, economic reasons, and also consider, again, how this response, or lack thereof, is going to help lead to World War II.